Hello, and welcome to Diana's Makerspace for this March 19th, 2025. What I'd like to talk about is how is home ec related to computer science? Some people think, well, really, home ec, computer science, home ec is for girls, computer science is for guys. When I went to junior high school, that was the case. When many of us took shop, I wanted to take home ec. Well, a friend of mine who grew up in Lake Forest, he was born in the mid 1940s, and Lake Forest had a policy where guys could take home ec, and he actually did take home ec while he was in the Lake Forest school system, learned how to cook, sew, and everything else. With me, I learned how to do sewing and cooking through my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother was a seamstress. She worked with satins, silks, and she would basically knew French couture, Russian couture techniques. So she taught me. And reason why I say why is home ec related to computer science? Because well, when you think about making something, whether you sew with a needle and thread or sew with a sewing machine, um, what's a common thing used in computer science? Threading. And what do you put those clothes together with? Threads. Pillows are with threads. And let's think of some common languages. Well, for me, the first common language they used threading was fourth. And this was about the late 70s. What happens, I saw an article in Byte magazine. I read the fourth book by Brady. I actually wrote my own fourth interpreter on a TI 99.4 from what I read from the book and what I read from the Byte article. And a few months later at Parkside, they had the Apple II Pluses with Graph Fourth, which is graphical fourth, where you could actually do different things like butterflies and other things. And I remember one day I just wanted to try some simple stuff, and I was amazed after an hour how much my graphics was because my mind on art was not based on traditional art of acrylics, like Professor Holmes noted. He said, well, because years later when we met, he said, if I knew what you really wanted to do with art, I understand why you had to take computer science because you had to know how to write the code to do the artwork. Because I wanted to do art using technology and using graphics and everything. And I remember what Professor Holmes has class one time. He said, "Well, there are 4 million colors." And I raised my hand. And he said, "Yes." He says, "This is before I transitioned." He called me by my other name, and I said, "Well, Professor Holmes," I said, "according to Byte magazine, in the recent issue, there's graphics card that can go up to 16 million." He said, "Really?" He said, "Well, can you show me this after class?" And he's glad I brought this up. So we went to the library class, showed the article. The next class, he bought the issue. He says, "Well," he says, "see, this is where we can actually think about where art and technology confuse." And this was part of the reason why, even like years later, when I had advanced internet, I had advanced internet with the service provider, I had business internet. And one time I called him and I said, "Well, it's not the business internet isn't working." He says, "Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm watching videos." Well, you have business internet. Why are you watching videos? Because I wanted to watch videos in high resolution. This was about late 1990s, early 2000s. And at that time, it was Yahoo music video. So I wanted to watch it beyond 240 pixels. I wanted to see exactly how was the shading and the sound. And even like in '89, when I saw Madonna's video, Cherish, my parents saw it and they said, "Wow, you can really do that with black and white. You can get high resolution, high shading, and everything else better than what you can in 64." I said, "Yeah, Dad." I said, "Mom," I said, "God, you get," and what happened? But at that time in Wisconsin, everyone had going to practical fields, so I went in medical research, which still allowed me to do my hobby, do my what I wanted to do with computer graphics, art, and other things. Um, and when I went in medical research, I interviewed with one person. I'll just use his first name and his last initial, Davey. Later became a prominent professor at West Coast University. But one thing I liked about Dave was he never required anyone to call him Dr. E or something else or Dr. Dave. He thought that was pretentious, and we both had the same attitude because years later I get my PhD in artificial intelligence, one of three. Um, and well, that one thing he asked about was I told him about some of my things and places. Oh, I said, "Well, that's great. That's going to work good with the lab and everything because we're doing graphics with the FactStar Plus and other stuff." And so he said, "Well," he said, "just as long as you use your time, any free time you can do with your projects." And that was a great arrangement. And other thing about what fourth use was called reverse Polish notation. And what that means is basically if you want to add two numbers like 2 plus 3, you put 2, 3 plus. Or if you want to divide 2 divided by 3, 2, 3 divided by. And when I talked with some people in the Milwaukee area, and sometimes being Polish myself, at that time there's a lot of racism about Polish jokes and other stuff. I said, well, you usually shouldn't be talking about reverse Polish notation because that's, that people downgrade us anyway, saying we do things backwards. I said, no, this is the good thing. This is the good part. And when I did interview with Dave, one thing he was great. He was not from Milwaukee. He was out of Milwaukee. But he said, well, is there anything you don't like about Milwaukee? I said, well, and I did like Carl Zimmerman used to do. Can I speak freely? And he said yes, sure. I said, well, I said one thing I don't like about Milwaukee is the Polish jokes, the Polish racism. I said my dad and grandfather had to go through Polish jokes. I will not. I said if I hear one Polish jokes, my resignation will be I'll walk out the door and never come back. And I said, if you still want to hire me, um, that's good. But if you don't want to hire me, I understand. And then what happens? Dave said, well, he does a phone call, so he took a phone call. I waited in the break room for about 45 minutes. Then when another person came and talked to me about poker, I said, well, I'm doing a music program and trying to do music, but I'm using basically print to try to print the sounds. I said, well, should we use the Putzi because it's faster? And then about 10 minutes later, a person who had become a very close friend, Karen, came, bought me a cup of coffee, and she said, well, Dave will see you now and then. And then what happened is Dave said, well, okay, he says, well, I accept your offer. He says, I just have to see if they can get the paperwork done. Could you start on possibly Monday? I said, sure. I said, so I went talked to my parents, and what happens about, I was wondering because I didn't get a call on Monday, then I got a call on Tuesday. They said, yeah, you got all your paperwork. Can you come up on Wednesday and sign the paperwork? So I signed the paperwork and worked. But the point is, what happens though is, in computer science, threading is a very important issue, and also basically about speaking up to overcome racism. Because when people say Polish jokes, they say, "Oh, that's funny." That Polish people say it just like Jewish people say Jewish jokes. No, to me, that's not funny. That's trying to perpetuate stereotypes. So, and like many people, I tell people, they say, "Well, you're a Polak." I said, "No, I stopped being. My family stopped being Polak a long time ago. We're Americans. We're not from the old world. We're Americans. We're in the new world. So all that old world racism about Polish stereotypes and stuff. Nope, use that with us. We won't work with you." And what happens is basically throughout my career, you got to stand up for yourself. Now with threading, for example, fourth, you use threading to link subroutines together. Now, what happens years later, basically threading became a different way where you actually had processes spin out from each other like this. And then what happens a few years later, Edinburgh came out with Linda, where you have all these processes out like this, but then you have them coordinated. So basically, you have a central two processes. You can say, okay, well, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. And then they can go to another process and say, oh, great, okay, now we're all done. And this is where HomeEC is very similar to computer science because threading is a concept of where you link things together and also where you link patterns together. Because when you sew, what happens when you make a sleeve, for example, you actually make a parabola. So when you could connect the sleeve to it, you connect two parabolas like this. Not everything is a straight line. It's a parabola connecting curves, and threading is the same way. Not all threads are point to point. A lot of threads are sort of like this if you really think of the data geometry or topology of it. And this is why threading is very much, HomeEC is very much like computer science. And when I talk with people, I said, please advocate STEAM, not STEM. I prefer STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, because when I went to Parkside for my bachelor's degree, I had a pre-med degree along with a computer science and equivalent of an EECS computer science degree, in addition to a breadth of knowledge, which nowadays would be considered a minor in art and history. And when I saw Professor Holmes many years later, David, he said, well, if I knew what you're doing, I'd have you continue. I would have asked you to continue more in art, because he said, I didn't realize it. But I said, now I do. He says, And the one thing Grant Parkside did do in computer science now, they have two programs. They both of them. One is STEAM based, which is based in the theater department, computer science in the theater department, where you work with graphics, lighting, Arduino, everything else. And they got another one in the department I was in, basically, which was EECS, computer science, but now it's business, economics, and computers. Which, God, I hate that designation. Um, and try to be loyal to my department, but so I was fun, but I don't like it that basically the computers are mainly thought as basically the way some people in old world think of the field of informatics, medical information. No, this is that's why whenever I tell people, I recommend people take the STEAM portion, which is in the theater department, because it's important you have the STEAM, and focusing just on the business aspect of Android and narrowly focused on computer security. It's like I watched one program on Apple TV, basically called Prime Target, and one grad student was talking to his professor. He said, "Well, he said if you hadn't come up with this one theorem, you would have been 10 to a penny." And in my time, when I left the research park and switched careers, my dad was warning me because, well, to produce overproduce computer scientists are now 10 to a dollar. And when I think of nowadays seeing this one thing on this Apple saying 10 to the penny, that's a rather shocking thing, because what that means then, rather than being 10 to a dollar, it's 10,000 to the dollar. If 10 to the penny, 10 to the penny means, no, 1,000 to the dollar. Wait, 10 to the penny, 10 to the penny means 10,000 to the dollar. I mean, that's a scary thought, to know that you're competing against 10,000 other people instead of 10. And that's why I say, focus on STEAM, and that's why I think multicultural skills are important, like home ec and other stuff. And the other thing, what I think about when I watch these sewing videos, with many people that do these sewing videos, a common thing is girls can't do math. But when you look at a sewing video, someone's making a circle skirt. A circle skirt is based upon computing the radius, computing a quadrant of a circle, and then the length of the skirt, the other part, or when you make a panel skirt or other things. There's a lot of mathematics involved. Who says girls can't do math? It is, again, an old world cultural thing that needs to stop. I'm glad many women have come out with math books, and also many women who were actresses demonstrate that they are intelligent, just like old actresses like Hedy Lamarr and others. So we got to focus on STEAM. We got to get over old stereotypes, including racist stereotypes, ethnic stereotypes, like how Polish people treated. Like a friend of mine, he lived in Lake Forest, but his family's Swedish, but the Swedish family in Lake Forest, when he lived there, he always calls it tiptoeing for the rich. We tried to talk with the Lake Forest Historical Society about this. We're maybe making progress, but slowed. But when I mentioned to her, I said, well, based on what I told her, I said, well, actually, I said, well, in a way, you were treated the way black people were treated in the United States, even though you're Swedish. And I said, I can understand why some of your neighbors actually decided to go back to Sweden after the war, because they rather live in a poor post-war Europe as a white person, rather than be treated and discriminated against as a black person in the post-war United States. And he said, yes, exactly, because even when his father retired, he had to fight hard to get his father's Social Security, and to fight hard to get over the conditioning that his father went through, living through that tiptoeing racist culture. And that's why when my dad was always glad about it, he says, well, I'm glad you have an Irish temper, and I'm glad you don't have a Polish temperament, because sometimes Polish people are too nice, too kind. And I do have, because I am part Scotch Irish on my mother's side. And stand up for yourself, but don't get violent. Use your intelligence, use your legal rights, and don't depend on politicians. They only will help you if you wave their flag and you knee-jerk their way exactly without thinking for yourself. You can do a lot by thinking for yourself, and you can do a lot by working in small groups. But the thing is, keep an open mind, because home ec and computer science are very much related to each other. So it's not, and so I hope basically more people will realize, and more school systems will realize, it's better to teach both sides, rather than just have the guys in industrial arts and mathematics and science, and the girls in home ec. Comingle, Comingle. It does better. It does better. So, well, let me know what you think. I prefer receiving comments on YouTube or on X, like they're on Facebook too. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And and the thing is, always try new things. And remember, when you do make stuff, you got a right to get paid. You have a right to get paid. So, I mean, there's a new thing where they want to change the copyright law, where basically if you put stuff on there, someone uses an AI to generate stuff from your stuff you put on a chat room or something. I don't support the changes in that copyright law because I support that basically if it uses your stuff to generate an AI answer, you deserve to get paid. So you deserve to get paid. Well, this has been Diana's Makerspace for March 19, 2025. And I'd like to thank you for watching and I'd like to thank you for your support.